Welcome to today's webinar. This is part 5 in my Evolving Your Remote Workforce series. Today's session is Windows Virtual Desktop. My name is Andrew Rigg. I'm a solution architect at Perfect Image, and my focus is around public cloud, specifically Microsoft Azure, AWS, and Microsoft 365. Perfect Image is a managed service provider located in the northeast of the UK. We're a consultancy-led business with over 90 IT professionals across 3 business units, covering business intelligence, business systems, and IT infrastructure. As the global situation continues to change and evolve, we need to allow teams and businesses to adapt rapidly. Windows Virtual Desktop has become an invaluable service to many businesses over the last few months and has really been an enabler for the remote workforce. As this solution grows and matures, it continues to have an important role as we start to return the workforce to the office, but continue as a remote-first workforce. So what we're going to cover today is, what is Windows Virtual Desktop? Its architecture, the costs, the licensing, desktop versus remote app. So remote app can often be referred to as published applications. And then we're going to go into the demonstrations. So deploying and managing the user access. So again, this is the desktop and remote app, but on various devices. Application masking and conditional access policies. So the conditional access is around securing the access to Windows Virtual Desktop. Please ask any questions as we go, as I'll be checking throughout the session. So today you'll see that you can use any Windows 10, Mac, iOS, or Android device. You can even have access to a full Windows 10 desktop via a web browser. Policies and rules can be created so users can access either their full desktop or only access to the applications via remote apps. You can also add those conditional access policies, to enforce MFA and use Microsoft Intune to manage the session hosts, prevent files from being shared onto personal devices. So Office 365 and desktop virtualization helps companies address specific business needs. More secure and centralized access to data, and organizational resources, compliance with industry regulations, so finance, healthcare, government. Also with rapid expansions and mergers, acquisitions, short-term contracts, contractor or partner access. So there's also employee-specific needs, BYOD, mobile staff, remote workers, call centers, branch workers. And then you're going to get down to the specialized workloads. So this is where you may have a kind of a GPU requirement, for a design or engineering teams. So an example of a specialized workload, right? You might have a process that requires a graphic optimized machine, but let's call it 12 cores and 100 gig of RAM, right? But you only require this for about 7 hours a month. Well, if you use WVD, you can expect to pay approximately £25 for this, rather than thousands of pounds by purchasing the hardware, only to find that the use case has evolved, or you're now left with either an underspec'd hardware or wasted resource because you no longer have this requirement. If you had deployed with WVD, then you'd simply add more resource to the host, or you'd delete if no longer required. So Windows Virtual Desktop, often referred to as WVD, and you'll hear me use that term frequently. Like traditional RDS, remote desktop services, Windows Virtual Desktop can have groups of users sharing session hosts. But users now have the true Windows 10 multi-session experience. But you're not limited to the Windows 10 user experience. You can still have your dedicated hosts or specific, kind of for those specific users or tasks. Server 2012 and Windows 7 environments are also supported. So if you have a specific requirement that you must use these operating systems, you can still benefit from having, cloud managed remote desktop service solution. When you're using the multi-session kind of experience, so Windows 10's multi-session experience, user profiles are attached to the host instantly on login with use of FX logics, and profile containers. So this means that the hosting costs are vastly reduced when comparing to a desktop as a service or virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI. So an example of costs, right? So for a 50 user environment, Windows Virtual Desktop, you can expect to pay around £10 per user per month for the infrastructure hosting. The price per user per month reduces as you add more users. So a 500 user environment costs around £5 per month. Rights to consume and access WVD and FX logic is provided by your Microsoft 365 license. Your only other real costs that I did add into those monthly costs is for the storage for the user profiles. But as most of the user's data is offloaded into the 365 services like OneDrive and SharePoint, requirements for the profiles is vastly reduced. So looking at a traditional remote desktop services, in the past you'd have to manage and maintain the entire environment. For a truly highly available environment, you require multiple web access and gateway servers. You would also need multiple brokers, and then kind of when you get down to your users' desktops and the app servers there, you also do require multiple of those. You still require your Windows domain servers, so your AD servers. You typically have 2 of those, and then you still have that requirement for your SQL DB. And that's so you've got about 8 to 10 servers for a truly highly available legacy RDS environments. That's even before you start to scale out your hosts for those larger environments. Also with RDS, you do have to punch a hole in your firewall for port 3389. Which increases your threat surface and increases those risks, associated to misconfiguration. So with the release of Windows Virtual Desktop hosted in Azure, you only have to manage your session host servers. Microsoft takes care of the rest of the other services. The session hosts are essentially the servers that your users would use. In the traditional RDS, that may often be referred to as farm members. Now, with the latest spring release, of Windows Virtual Desktop has gone generally available in July, users can now have full access to the desktop and remote app from the same session host. And also, unlike RDS, you no longer have to open port 3389. So connections are initiated by the WVD broker, so that the host will grant access to the remote client once the resource has been granted access by Azure AD. Users can connect to the Windows desktops and applications from their preferred devices, securely from any internet connection without the previous risks of 3389, as long as you allow this. So we'll discuss how this can be controlled with conditional access. So just on this one here then, so basically all that you require for a truly highly available fault-tolerant environment is just 2 session hosts, and the desktop's apps can be on the same session host. Everything else we're looking at here, Active Directory, user profiles, brokers, gateways, web access, diagnostic, all supported and managed by Microsoft. Yes. So what are the prerequisites needed to deploy WVD? Well, you need your Azure subscription. You need to be able to deploy virtual machines, network resources, and all the items you typically need to spin up a VM. You need Azure Active Directory, but if you're using Office 365, Intune, or other Microsoft cloud services, it means that you already have this. So we also need to determine your identity strategy. So AD or Azure ADDS. More to come on this on the next slides. All the associated resources, as per the kind of first point there, should be in the same region. It's not a requirement, but it's recommended for best performance. Also, the credentials required to deploy and manage. So depending upon the size of your organization, this may be different people, or it could be the same person. So there's three main options for the identity strategy, and the use case will depend on the type of environment you have. If you're born in the cloud business, then we would recommend that you use Azure ADDS. So that's not a stutter. It stands for Azure Active Directory Domain Services. So I'm just going to pause for a minute to check if there are any questions yet. Okay, got a question here. So what's the cost difference between VDI and WVD? Well, there's a lot of little differences. Firstly, VDI is traditionally, or it is a 1-to-1 ratio. So one user, one VM. So it's got dedicated hardware per user, but this provides guaranteed consistent resource, but it does have that higher price per user. WVD can be deployed as personal, so that's your kind of 1-to-1 as well, but it's more commonly deployed as pooled. So more like your traditional RDS, where you have many users sharing the virtual machine resources. This is how the price per user per month reduces. There's also another question here about the differences between the identity options, but I think my next couple of slides will cover these, so I'll move on. So for businesses born in the cloud, this is when you'd use Azure AD and Azure AD domain services. So Azure AD domain services, this is a Windows server run as a service by Microsoft. So there's two servers there always, so you do have a highly available environment. It allows for VMs to be domain joined so that users and VMs are recognized in both Azure AD and Windows Server AD. When using this service, everything happens in your Azure AD. It's automatically replicated to the domain controllers that's been run for you as a managed service. So changing users' passwords automatically replicated. You don't have to manage any more AD Connect. So you do continue to manage all aspects in Azure AD. You don't have to go back to Windows AD. So when you've got an existing environment, whether this be on-premise or in Azure, you generally use a hybrid approach. So this is where you've got Azure AD and the Windows AD server, but you manage the Windows AD server yourself. So if your Active Directory is on-premise, you can connect to Azure or extend by adding another domain controller in the local Azure environment. So that can be done with either ExpressRoute or with these traditional site-to-site VPN, and then use Azure AD to synchronize those identities. So essentially, you're still managing your identities from your on-premise or Windows Active Directory servers. So up on screen on the left-hand side are the Microsoft 365 plans that will give you rights to Windows Virtual Desktop and FX Logics. Generally, if you have a Microsoft 365 license and not the Office 365 license, you will have rights. On the right, if you want to access your server workloads, with WVD, then you will require RDS CALs with active software assurance. For both options there, you can still take advantage of reserved instances, so that's your 1 and 3 year plans where you can save up to 70% versus pay-as-you-go pricing, and now with monthly payment options. So up on the screen are 6 of the most popular 365 plans. From the products on screen, there are 3 that have rights to Windows Virtual Desktop. So they are Microsoft 365 Business Premium and Microsoft 365 E3 and E5. Licensing can be confusing. There's over 20 different Microsoft and Office 365 plans, and there's about another 70 or 80 other add-on licenses. I do just want to point out as well that the chart on screen is only a selection of a full comparison, but points out the most common requirements. The Microsoft Business Premium should be the kind of go-to license now for any SMB with under 300 users. It's a complete package for the productivity, security, and compliance, and includes the rights to WVD and FXS logics for the profile containers. Just going to quickly check for questions again before I move on. So is Microsoft 365 Business Premium the same as Office 365 Business Premium? No. So this is where Microsoft likes to keep us on our toes. So there was a name change about 2 months ago when Office 365 Business Premium was renamed to Microsoft Business Standard. Now, Microsoft Business Premium is a step up on this plan, but importantly gives you the rights to WVD, and it contains a lot of the security and compliance features from the Office E3 and kind of EMS E3 plans. So I've got more detail around this on a webinar I did. I think it was either part 1 or part 2. It's now available on demand, or we can kind of reach out after this session. So I'm going to do a demo for deploying a WVD environment, and managing the users, the host pools, and application groups. I'm mainly going to be working with the new ARM WVD release, but I will compare the 2 management portals at a high level. Just before I move on here, so just wanted to explain what workspaces are host pools, and session hosts, as this can cause confusion. So up on the screen, I've got a screenshot from the Mac remote desktop client. So there's 2 workspaces here on screen. So we've got the Windows Virtual Desktop Workspace and the Perfect Lab WVD Workspace. Excuse me. So workspaces can contain multiple resources, and the resources are either the remote apps or they are the host pools. So again, down this one here, we've got the remote apps here, and in this one here, we do have 2 different host pools. So yes, your workspace can contain multiple host pools, but you may only have a requirement for a single workspace and a host pool, depending upon your requirements. Host pools, they contain a number of session hosts, right? So each host pool requires a minimum of 1 session host, but can have up to 500. Now, session hosts are essentially the servers that users are assigned to when they're logged in. Okay, so now for this one here, I have completed all the prereqs, so we'll go straight into creating the new host pool. Okay, so when creating the host pool, we assign the subscription, we select our resource group, and we give our host pool a name. Okay, so we're going to call this one WVD UK. Now, you've got different host pool types, personal and pooled. Pooled is your multi-user, personal is your kind of one-to-one. So we're going to go pooled, we're going to say 10 users, and our load balancing is going to be breadth first. So kind of round robin, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, versus our depth first. Okay, so we're going to select the region that we're going to want to deploy in. We're going to go UK South. And we're going to say how many VMs we want to deploy. And we can select our size. I'm just going to leave it as default for now. Give our names a prefix. This will show up in your Active Directory. And for the image type, I'm just going to use a gallery image just for speed and select version 2004 with Microsoft Office. Pick Premium SSD so I get the SLAs. And I've already got my VNets and subnets created. So I'm going to turn off my security group because I've got them associated with my subnet. And now the administrator account. This is your domain admin account to join these servers to your Active Directory. Okay, password. Okay, and I want to register to my existing workspace. I'm not creating a new workspace here. Tags, I'm not going to do what's best practice, and I'm going to skip doing the tags because it's just a demo environment. And we're just going to review, that's passed, the validation, and now we're going to create the deployment process. Now, we are going to use the magic of video here and skip this step here, but it will take about, I think it's 10 or 11 minutes in this instance here for us to deploy. Okay, we're all deployed. So this tells us how many session hosts we have within this pool. So you can see there's 1 unavailable, probably hasn't caught up yet. We'll go to our session hosts. Here's our hosts here, and we can see that they're both available. And our application group, this is our default desktop application group, so the full desktop. Now there's no users currently assigned to this, so I'm just going to add myself to it, just so we can actually access this resource. Now, one of the benefits of ARM is you can now do your security groups. So you can add your users to a group and add the group to the permissions. So if we go to our client and if we refresh our workspaces, we're going to see our new desktop arrive next to where it's got desktop users. Okay, so our workspace has now got our new host pool default desktop. Not a great name, we will change that. So we'll just connect to this new session now. Okay, and we have now deployed and we now have access to our brand new host pool and session hosts in under 15 minutes. Now, say the prereqs are done, we're not done on this VM yet. We'll have to obviously install all our applications and make it kind of configure it as we normally would before we give it access to our resources, sorry, to our users. But what we're going to do is rename this desktop. So this host pool. So we'll go to host pools, we'll select our host pool we just created. And we're going to go to our application groups and our desktop application group. And we're going to change our friendly name because it's not terribly friendly. So let's go to properties. And here's where we change the name. So if we deploy this as a CAD machine, so GPU optimized for those users, we'll name it accordingly. If we again refresh this workspace, you'll see the name will update. Okay, so now we're CAD desktop. Right, so into the kind of management portal sides of things. On the left is the new kind of release. This is the ARM release, and on the right is now the legacy. You know, it's WVD v1. You can see that the detail on here that you have for both sides is the same. You know, so far anyway. So we've got access to our host pools and we've got access to our session hosts. We do have a nicer look and feel, obviously, with the new release. App groups, and here's our application groups in the new ARM model too. And once we go to our hosts again, what we'll do is if we go into the host itself, you can see the user sessions, who's either logged in or in this case disconnected. And we've got the same information available to us as well. So far, same, you know, different look and feel. You've got both drain modes and kind of log off modes and forcing users to log off within both sessions as well. So if we go to our application groups, this is where we'll start to see some differences. So we've got full kind of RBAC rights now with our new ARM model, and the way that we assign our users is different as well. So if we try to assign users within the legacy portal, you know, it is very much you need to assign user by user. You didn't have the ability to add groups, and you had to manually type in the full address. Versus New World, you can search for the users or search for the group. The adding the security groups is a massive step forward. And then, of course, we can still do our individuals as well. So the information that we've got available to us, say, is similar between the two portals. You can see in the old portal to the left, it was referred to as WVD tenants. We're now workspaces. The way in which you deploy is vastly different as well. So I'm just going to pause for a moment and check if there's any questions before I move on. Okay, so a couple of questions. Can the host pools be renamed? So If you make a typo like I did in naming your host pools, no, currently the host pools can't be renamed, but you can change the friendly name for them that appears to users. So just not the back end side. And also, so you said ARM portal. So what did you mean by this? So ARM stands for Azure Resource Manager. So this is the modern way of deploying resources in Azure. So before ARM, it was classic. But when WVD was released GA last year, it wasn't using the ARM model for its kind of deployment mechanisms. We can say it was difficult to deploy and manage. So, but now the ARM release is generally available as of July. That's a recommended way going forward. Okay, so I'm going to demo connecting to Windows Virtual Desktop from web browser, Mac client, and also from the iPad. I'm also going to demo both the desktop mode and remote apps. So remote apps, again, otherwise people know them as published applications. Right, so we're going to log in with our two guinea pig users here. We're going to log in with Westy, who's been prompted for MFA. So we'll just approve this on our phone. Okay, that should be approved. And we'll sign in now with our user 2. This user doesn't have MFA prompt on this user, so we'll go straight into the actual landing page, if you want to call it that, the kind of control plane. So what we can see in here is whatever applications we've got assigned to us, or remote apps, and the host pools available to us. So now we're going to authenticate with the actual server itself. We're going to log into the server. The first login was that's just logging in to the kind of web browser session. And log in with user 2. So we're not going to be prompted for MFA here because we've already authenticated. Okay, so now we're in the web browsers here. We do have two different browsers. We've got Chrome and we've got Safari. Now, because we're in a web browser, you can just resize your web browser, and your Windows 10 WVD session automatically refreshes its resolution to match that browser size. So no matter what browser you're on, what device you're on, it does refresh to be the correct size. Fairly snappy too. So quickly do the same with Safari, just to show you. There we go, snaps to full screen, and we can go back. Okay, so if we want to connect, via the actual, on this one here is the Mac client. Now we've got the two workspaces here, as we said. What we'll do is we'll minimize the top workspace, and we're just going to work with the below workspace and Windows Virtual Desktop. So again, we're showing what remote apps we've got available, and if we want to connect to our full Windows 10 session. So we'll authenticate here. And again, there is no port 3389 open for this to work. It's the broker and the gateway service kind of talking in reverse. So I'm just going to quickly create a document here because we will use this for demos later on. Okay, so we're just going to quickly save this to OneDrive. Okay, so that's saved. We'll close this one out. Right, so now if we go into our remote apps, so if we double click on File Explorer, we now have access to File Explorer and we're on a Mac. So this is directly into the remote app session. If from within the remote app session, we now go to our OneDrive and we want to open that Word document we've just created, we'll just double click and now this will open Word. Now Word isn't installed locally on this device. So this is again, the published application. It's a great way for sharing Windows applications with non-Windows based users. So Notepad, it's a Windows app on a Mac. Obviously, it's running in the remote desktop session. I'll save this one, we'll use that one later as well. So regardless of whatever applications you want to publish, if you need to add more applications to those users, then we just do it through our remote apps. And what we'll do here is we'll give myself, so who I'm picking here, access now to access. So we're just picking applications from the start menu. You can specify the actual path, so it's not within your start menu. So these are all the ones listed on this server. But what we'll do is we'll just pick Excel as well. Okay, so now they're added. So again, if we go back to our workspace and we just refresh this workspace, we're now going to see that Excel and Access will appear and will now be available for us to start consuming. So I'm just going to sign into the web session again. So this one is now using Firefox, the browser. We'll just log in here and I'm going to show you the remote apps via the web browser. So these are our remote apps that we've got assigned or available for this user. Now, because this is the first time we're trying to launch one of the remote apps, we will be asked to authenticate to the server, essentially logging into our session on the server. And we've now got access in the remote apps to whatever applications are published. So now if we go into File Explorer, then it's straight in because we've already authenticated. And launching the same Word document, again, prompts the Word publish application to open. And if we log into the desktop session again quickly here, okay, what we'll do here is we'll just open up Outlook and then we'll kill this session. Okay, so we'll just leave it there and we'll close our, actually what we'll do is leave it open and we'll open up our client version. What this will do is this will disconnect our previous session. So if we've come onto a different device now and we're straight in where we were, we don't have a second session running in the background. Going from the iPad, if we click on the app, the remote app, and if we click here on File Explorer, so on the iPad, as a published application, we will now authenticate because it's our first time. And we'll just put in a password. Now we're going to have access to File Explorer on the iPad. And again, we can then launch our Word document and that will then open up Word if we have access to Word, otherwise it wouldn't launch Word. If I click on the button here, I will actually get my keypad. Okay, we'll just jump out of this one here. So we'll update the document again. If we want to, instead of using the remote apps, we'll snap to home here and we'll launch the full desktop session. Again, because this is the first time we're authenticating via the host pool, we have to authenticate. Okay, so now we have a full Windows 10 desktop session on an iPad. So let's say Excel. And then we can start doing whatever we need to within Excel. So regardless of whatever device we're using, you can still access your desktop from anywhere with any device, as long as you allow that. And we'll go into those policies again shortly. Right, questions? Let's see if we have any. So why would you use a remote app and not the full desktop? So really various reasons. But so if you're a cloud-based business, and so you're using all the 365 services, but if you have a legacy application or applications that your users need to access, then just publish the application. They don't need to have that full desktop experience. So then that way another set of users can also have access to a separate application, but it's on the same server. So you're not managing multiple servers for this. Other reasons are security. So why give users access to the full desktop environment if they don't need it? So it can be used for contractors, short-term hires. So just give them access to the applications they want. So if you haven't configured your desktop environment fully, then there is no kind of way of snooping around and actually getting access to anything or any area that they shouldn't have access to. FX Logics, right? So with the acquisition of FX Logics, this has really been the enabler for Windows Virtual Desktop, for Microsoft. It provides the profile containers. So it replaces roaming profiles and folder redirection, and it dramatically kind of increases user login time and application launch time. So with it, we can also configure application masking, or app masking. So this helps us to minimize the number of gold images by creating a single image with all the applications, so you hide or mask the applications for users who don't require it. So what is FX Logics? So as a profile container solution, well, it's your profile, kind of stored in a VHD or VHDX. It's mounted at login, so it provides that kind of faster login, so no target storage is required. It's more performant and more resilient. So the size of the profile doesn't impact the login time, unlike kind of roaming profiles. Profile containers redirects everything from the user profile. It uses filter drivers, and it causes the profile to appear local. So this provides broader application support. So the system thinks the disk is internal. It's key for apps that require system or local drives to work. You have multiple options for profile containers when using FX Logics as well. But the recommended approach is to use Azure files with premium back storage for low latency and better throughput. For larger environments, then Azure NetApps files should also be considered. Right, so I'm going to demo application masking now. So this is using FX Logics and using rules. So this allows us to have the same image for the host pools for all our users to use, but we can hide or mask the applications we don't want to see. So in this demo, I'll be doing this with Chrome, but this can be done for any application installed on the session host. It's not kind of a browser specific item. Okay, so we've got the two same, well, it's the same host, WVD Spring Release 0. We've got user Andy and user Westy. So we're just going to open up our rule editor and we're going to create a new rule. So the rules have to be in program files for them to apply for all users. So we'll just save our rule straight in that location. You want to give this a relevant name. So when you come back to it to edit the rule, you know what you're editing. You choose or define which program. So we're going to choose Chrome in this case here. So Chrome is available for both users, we can see. Okay, so once we've done this, what we'll do is now we'll apply the permissions to this. So everyone does it, so that this rule doesn't apply to everyone currently. So we're going to add a user. Again, we can do groups. We're going to pick on Westy over on the right. And once we apply this rule, you will see, and you can see the rule applies yes. Once we apply, the icon Chrome has now disappeared from the desktop. So if the user tries to access Chrome, tries to search for it, that's the best match. If we try to run as administrator, we try to open file location, it's not there. It doesn't exist as far as that user is aware. Second user, who the rule didn't apply to, we can see Chrome is there and the icons on the desktop. And if we launch it, we launch fine. So again, if we try to click, we get nothing. We can't run as administrator. Not available. So what we'll do is we'll quickly make the change and we'll reverse that. And you can see how quickly we can actually manage. So it doesn't apply, and we'll apply that, and our icon has now appeared on our desktop and in the actual location itself. So now we can launch straight away. So say we did this with Chrome, but this can be any application. So it prevents us from having a lot of different images and different host pools. So if your finance users use a different set of applications from HR or from sales or factory workers, you can use the same image and the same host pool, depending upon how many users you have and what you should be doing to drastically decrease the cost of the environment and decrease the management side. So I'm going to do another demo. This one's for creating a conditional access policy and how it kind of affects and secures users when connecting to the WVD service. So we're going to target users. We're going to target the WVD service. So it's the reasons for it. Well, again, we can go granular for these users. We don't need to do a blanket rule that affects everyone. We can target those services. And it is kind of the security best practice of doing that conditional access. Right, so we're in our Active Directory. We're going to go to security and conditional access. These are the rules that we currently have. Now they're all off. We've got one on report only. What we'll do is we'll create a new policy. We'll call it enforce MFA for WVD users. Now we're going to assign it to a group of users. And again, we can either do the security groups that these users are assigned to, or we can do individual users. Now for this demo, I'm just going to use the individual users because I do want to change it later on and show you the effects. So we'll just remove this one. Okay, so cloud apps. So are we doing all 365 services or are we selecting one? So we're going to select and we're going to choose the Windows Virtual Desktop Service, if I can spell properly. Okay, and for this to work, we do have to choose the two services selected here on screen. That's for the ARM model. Now, conditions-wise, we've got a lot of different conditions. We won't go into all of them. But we've got device platforms, so we can specify what this kind of rule is for. What devices are we allowing? What devices does this policy kind of exclude it from? Also locations, so we can basically say it's from any location or it's just from trusted locations. So if we exclude trusted locations, then the policy won't apply. And then we've got access. So is this policy for granting access or is it for blocking out access? It might be for block if we're going to exclude a location. And we're going to turn the policy on. So we'll show you how this actually affects the users. Okay, so we've been asked for an MFA request. We'll approve it. And we'll do the same for Andy. So prompts coming through to the phone. So over to the phone, there's our sign verification. We're going to approve this. And we'll be granted access. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a change to the policy. So we'll log out of these users sessions. So back over in the policy itself. So let's sign out of Westy. And we'll make a change to this rule. So we're going to take Westy out of this rule. So this rule no longer targets Westy. Save that. So the effect is, as soon as we log in with Westy, we're not going to be prompted for MFA. It'll be straight through. But if we now log in, so let's log out of this session here. So we'll now log in as myself again. The policy is still targeting me. So as expected, I now get my MFA request. So that was conditional access in a very quick whirlwind. We could go through that in half an hour alone. And we've just signed in, and there we go. We now have access again. So again, I'm just going to pause for a few seconds. We're getting near the end now. So if you want to run through the self-assessment and while I check some questions. Okay, so the question here for, we've got workloads with another cloud provider. How long would it take to run a proof of concept? So this, I don't say it depends, but if you're happy with the kind of standard marketplace image, so the one that comes preloaded with Office 365, or not if you didn't want to, then I'd say within a day you can have the environment configured, either using your AD or the Azure AD managed offering. It would also be the FX logics for the profile containers and application masking. So as we kind of saw, it was relatively quick to actually spin up the environment and have it available, but it's the prereqs and just those final tweaks that kind of make up the rest of that day. If you did want to use a gold image, so with all your client apps on, pre-installed, so this might take you a few more hours to actually build the image, but then what we'll deploy that into the host pools so you can kind of do your end-to-end test. So here's my wrap up and takeaways from this session. So desktop versus remote app. So full Windows 10 desktop experience or specified applications. Increased security and compliance. So you can't lose a Windows virtual desktop, right? And you can access from any device with no data stored on that local device. So why use Windows virtual desktop? Well, remote working, remote workers, regulatory compliance, specialized workloads. If you have an aging or legacy RDS platform, then the WVD is the modern way of doing it. Licensing requirements. So understand what's included in your Microsoft 365 license and maximize that value of your plan. Understand the kind of cost components for Windows Virtual Desktop. So you specify the compute. Or we work with you to specify the compute and storage requirements for its performance, and you pay for what you use. The Microsoft 365 license gives you those rights, to consume WVD and access FX logics. So Perfect Image is offering incentives and free consultations to support our customers to develop their remote workforce. If your business is experiencing challenges or pain points with remote working, or you have concerns with security compliance, please get in touch. We are offering free consultations for UK businesses at the minute. So we'll have a chat around what issues you're facing, what you want to achieve, and how we can help fulfill your goals. Our job is to turn business problems into technical solutions. So I hope today's webinar has given some insights into the future of kind of remote working, moving away from traditional RDS to the new WVD service, and how and what you need to do to prepare to get here. Right, so I'll do one last check for any questions. Okay, so how does conditional access policies enforce the remote desktop client? Okay, So, so I think what you're meaning here is for the what effect does the conditional access policy have when you're using that full client? So I was using the Mac client. So when you subscribe to the workspace, you'll be prompted for MFA if that uses it in the policy. Not when you're accessing the machine. Another one here. So when would I use Windows Virtual Desktop over the likes of AWS Workspaces? So if you're new to public cloud, you don't have any workloads in AWS or Azure, and if you have a large user base who requires access to virtual desktops, that's one of the reasons. So what we will do is we will look at AWS, Azure, which one as a platform is actually better for you, which one sits, and then make those judgment calls based upon where your workloads are to what method you should be using. WVD can have the substantial cost savings, over the likes of AWS's Workspaces. But on the flip side, if you only have those few users that require access for a few hours each day, or month, then AWS Workspaces probably most likely is the better fit. So then you utilize you kind of auto stop and auto start. But there's a lot of considerations and factors that we need to look at for your workloads. So we'll have a conversation around that, and I'll be able to advise better. Okay, I think that is it. Yeah, unless any more questions come through, I'll call it a day. Well, thank you very much. If you have anything